This is Eric Kowal with US Combat Sports. I'm on the line with the Irish hand grenade, Marcus Davis. Now, Marcus, I've got a couple questions for you. You've trained with several different camps over the years. You're good friends with former UFC heavyweight champion Tim Sylvia. In fact, you followed him to train at Militich Fighting Systems. You've trained with George Gurgel in Ohio. You've trained with Mark Delagrati in Massachusetts. Are you still training with any of those camps, or are you primarily focused on running your gym, Team Irish MMA Fitness Academy?
Well, I do frequently, I shouldn't say frequently, but every now and then I will pop into the different places. I was over at George's just a couple months ago, and I plan on going down to Sittetong in the next maybe week or two. I actually just got a message from Mark telling me to give him a call, and we're going to talk about it. So I do kind of float around a little bit. Obviously, my focus and concentration, though, because I've kind of, started to peter out of the whole fighting scene, just fighting periodically, has been more on building my gyms and my working with my fighters and my other businesses that I have that are both MMA-oriented and outside of MMA.
Speaking of your gym, you have your training schedule online, and it says that you instruct both children's and adult MMA, as well as striking, takedowns. You have an open mat seminar, but you also teach 3 classes that I wanted you to talk about: Soldier Fitness, Monster Fitness, and Warrior Fitness. What are those about?
Okay, well, we basically what it is it's a fitness set up specifically for the athlete. Whether you're an MMA fighter or anything, athletes need to train differently than like a weightlifter. And people's focus usually, if you're weightlifting, your focus of training is going to be on linear movement and muscle isolation. So, when you don't think about it, we live in a 3D environment. So we need to train in 3D. In other words, rather than just working on what would be called the sagittal plane or the frontal plane or just the transverse plane, we need to be able to hit all those planes of motion. All your machines and your weightlifting, all that stuff pretty much focuses only on frontal and sagittal plane movement. So the transverse plane is the one that's ignored the most. So in those classes, and what I do is the soldier is the easier of the 3, warrior is the middle, and then monster is basically the impossible. So I make them, progressively harder throughout the week. They all focus on both mechanical strength, linear strength, focuses on body mechanics and explosiveness, and it's through using, plyometric and isometric movements, using lots of different training apparatuses, like anything. Some of them seem like really easy, and other things seem really hard. So, we have the weighted sled. We have a 450-pound tire. We've got the kettlebells. We do the heavy rope training. We do resistant band training. But anyways, it's truly to become a better athlete. I don't care if you're a basketball player, a football player, an MMA fighter, or a boxer. Through that kind of training is how you will become faster, stronger, and a more explosive athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it definitely would be a complete workout. Do you have a lot of students in those types of classes, or?
Yeah, they're very popular. I also do like a women's MMA fitness where I focus more on that too. So like for women, rather than it being trying to get women ready for an MMA fight, which the ones that are interested in training like that, they come to the rest of the week's training. The training sessions that we have where we actually do either MMA training or we isolate once again like you would if you were lifting. We isolate. As you see on there, striking and takedowns and whatnot. We have classes where we'll just focus on one certain thing. But with the women's tonight I'll be doing, that one does more, it's more about body awareness and functional training rather than actual, the MMA fighting.
Okay. Let's switch gears up a bit and talk about your career as a professional fighter. You're 4-1 in your last 5 fights, with 4 of the fights and 3 of those wins coming by way of decision. Throughout your career, a lot of your fights have ended in the first or second round by TKO or KO or submission. Do you feel that you've changed your fighting style a bit, or that maybe you're being more cautious, or it's just the way fights are going, or what do you think, the reason for those outcomes has been?
I think it's a combination of everything.
Okay.
I think that, in certain circumstances, you fight a certain way because I'm not going to say that this is always the point. I'm just going to kind of point out many different reasons why you might fight differently. And one might be maybe an injury, something that you know that the other person's good at and you're not so well at, so you try to protect. There can be, reasons for needing time in there to be able to get ring time because you're developing some ring rust. There's all kinds of different reasons why something might be happen, and I think that in all my fights, the ones that I've had, there have been times where certain aspects of what I'm saying are in play. I will say, in the fight that I had with Pete Spratt, when I fought Pete Spratt, my focus in that was I wanted to finish that fight. He's a buddy of mine, but I wanted to finish that fight. But I also, at the same time, wanted to make sure that I stood with him a lot of the fight to prove. It's kind of one of those. I know it sounds a little macho thing, but I know that a lot of people, when the first time him and I fought, and I submitted him on the ground, a lot of people said I would not stand with him at all, and I didn't understand that because in the first fight, I felt as though I got the better of the actual stand-up exchanges to begin with, and then I just happened to be on the ground, and that's where I finished him. And so in this last fight, I was hoping to be able to, but once again, Pete's a veteran, and I don't know in MMA how many times Pete's ever been knocked out or stopped from strikes, but anyways, that would have been that fight in particular. And then, the Curtis DeMars fight, I definitely wanted to finish that fight that was the last time I ever tried to cut to 155, and due to how badly that cut went and how difficult and everything that happened, I'll never fight at 55 again. But in that fight, I did want to finish that fight, and I did go for some submissions and dropped him a couple times in the fight, but just wasn't able to finish the kid off. And I think that, rather than that being a shot on me not able to finish it, I think it also goes to show the toughness of a kid like Chris DeMars, who, once again, isn't a guy that gets finished by knockouts and stuff. He's a guy that, if he does get caught and get finished, it's usually finished by a submission or something like that. But anyways, that's, every fight is different. None of the fights are the same.
Yeah, you just kind of touched on my next question. I was going to ask you about your move down to 155, because you said a couple years ago, and I'm going to quote you, you said, "I'm going to finish out my career at 155 and try to entertain some people along the way before my old ass retires." But now you're back up at welterweight, so I guess you don't want to be down at 155. I guess it was a tough cut for you.
Yeah, well, it was a health issue, if anything else. I mean, the first time I did it, it wasn't as difficult as it was the next time, and then the next time, because the first time I ever cut to 55, I wasn't fighting. I just tried to see if it was even possible, and I did it. And then what happened is that the next time I tried to cut, it just just became much more difficult, and I followed the same regimen to a T. You know, it wasn't like I changed anything up. I tracked everything and everything I did, and then the next time that I went to do it, I followed the same routine, but some other things happened along the way to the fight. Is that 3 of my fights got canceled, and I ended up sleeping in an airport, and a lot of stuff that shook up the whole me getting out there, and you know, I lost my voice cutting weight. I mean, I was in horrible position and shape after, you know, having such a drastic cut like that. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that what ended up happening is that there was a video that I don't know what it's under, but it could be found, and it's on YouTube someplace, and it's them they're talking to me after that weight cut, and I can't even speak. I sound like I'm 80 years old, and I was just completely out of it. And my wife, when I came home, I came from the bathroom into the bedroom, and my wife was actually sitting on the bed crying, and she had seen the video. And my wife's a healthcare professional, and, you know, we had the discussion, and my wife said, you know, you have to promise me that that's never going to happen again, because, you know, you just knocked years off your life from that. And she, you know, said, you know, I'll support you if you still want to fight, but I'm not going to support you if you're going to try to kill yourself in the process just to make 155 pounds. And, you know, I was at that time, too, you know, all the way, my whole UFC career, I walked around between 210 and 220, and then I would cut from that to 170, you know, and having to cut, you know, 60, 70 pounds is, in a 10-week period, definitely isn't the smartest thing to do, especially when my natural walk around is that of a 200-pound man, not that of a 155-pound guy.
Yeah, that is kind of ridiculous. Since we're talking about cutting weight, do you have any advice for fighters that are looking to cut weight for a fight? Any tips or experiences that might be helpful to some of the up-and-coming guys?
Well, I mean, it's hard because everybody's an individual. There's some people that will try to be really, like, matter of fact about it, and they'll be, oh yeah, if you're walking around at 185 pounds, then oh yeah, you definitely got to try, and you have to cut to 170, or some people will tell you to cut to 55 or whatever if you're walking around. Like I just got done saying, I'm walking around at 200, I'm cutting down to 55. There are people that are going to tell you that, oh, if you're 185, you can make 155. But it comes down to the individual. Not everybody that is walking around at 185 pounds has what we call, I refer to as muscle bellies, that hold all that water, or holding fat stores or whatnot. They could be just super lean, and no matter what they eat, their metabolism is, you know, shooting through the roof. No matter what they eat, they don't put weight on, but they're also not going to want to lose weight because of their frame and whatnot. So, you know, each person's an individual. I will say that as far as cutting weight, and everybody has all these like little tricks and stuff like that on what they do for cutting weight, I will tell you that the safest way that I've felt, the worst way is, you know, putting all the abalone on and the plastic suits, and then the sweats and the hats, and then going into the sauna. I think that is the worst way, and unfortunately, that's the way that tends to be the most accessible way to do it when you're trying to, you know, especially when you're traveling, to try to make weight. But it's, in my opinion, the most dangerous, because your whole body is going through that hot process of, you know, you're baking your brain. You're in the sauna. There is no relief. You've got a hat on, or even if you don't, you're still, your brain, your head, everything's in there, and that's where people, you know, unfortunately will become, you know, they can die, and it's because they become so seriously dehydrated, and their brain actually becomes dehydrated. So then, when you start taking shots and stuff to the head, that's where, you know, those deaths occur, whether it's a brainstem issue or just the actual beating, and they just don't come out of the recovery of it. So the way that I have found that I can cut weight and and it's a lot safer, and this is just me in particular. I don't know if this works for everybody, but I'll draw a really hot bath, and I'll put Epsom salts in it, and Epsom salts tend to pull and draw out, liquid out of your body. So I'll do that, and I'll put a little bit of wintergreen oil in there too, and that will open up your pores and pull everything out. And typically when I do that, if I sit and I do like a 30 or 40-minute bath, the first one I do, I usually lose between 4.5 to 5 pounds in just one sitting in 30 to 40 minutes. And then, every bath after that you would do, you would lose a little less. If you did another 30, 40 minutes, you would probably only lose, 3 pounds at the most. Mm-hmm. But I found that that's the best way to do it, and because only my lower body is submerged in the water, my head stays out of it, and I put like a nice cold washcloth on my head, and I actually chew on ice cubes and stuff like that, which people would say isn't that defeating the purpose because you're retraining the water. But I'll tell you what, the weight still falls off, and I do it that way, and I haven't had any problems at all when I've been able to do it that way. But there have been times, like in the last fight, I was going to use that to cut, even though I was fighting at 170, I was going to use that way to cut down to 170, and lo and behold, they put me in a hotel that doesn't have a bath. So right there, that's not happening. So, but it does help.
So you're going to be turning 40 years old later this year. What does the future hold for the Irish Hand Grenade? Are you looking to make a return to the UFC, or are you happy where you're at right now?
You know what? I mean, I don't know. I really don't know what my future holds or what I'm going to do or where I'll be in the next few months. I mean, it all depends. If I listen, I can listen. If I listen to people who train with me, people who train with me would say, "Oh my God, this is the best you've ever been. You look great," and I'm sparring with guys that are, younger than my kids. I got a daughter who's 22, and I got guys that I'm sparring with that are 21-year-old guys, and outworking them and in better shape, and But if you listen to everybody else, there's other people that are out there that say stupid stuff like, "Oh, his chin's gone," and he's over the hill, and he's, people say all this stuff, and there's nothing wrong with my chin, and people will look at it and go, "Oh, but he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights," and they'll say, the one loss that I have is a split decision loss. And I had taken the fight 2 weeks after a fight that I previously had, and I don't want to make him say a bunch of excuses or anything, but things like that happen. That's what happens when you fight, and you can't win them all the time, and you can't be performing, at your best all the time, and I shouldn't have scheduled 2 fights back to back within 2 weeks of each other. But and then like you mentioned, going to decisions and not finishing people. The people who don't train with me, or people that aren't around me on a daily basis, people that don't know me, they're going to say whatever they want to say. There's so many people, especially in MMA. Fans can be fickle, and they will love you one day, and then the next day say that you're a bum and whatnot.
Yeah.
But the only thing that matters to me is what my family says, and also teammates and trainers, and that's what matters.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I brought that up is 4-1 in the last 5 fights. That's pretty good, right? Like you said, it was a decision, a split decision. It sounds like you're trying to get your way back into the UFC. I mean, that's a pretty good win there. Is that the goal for you? Do you want to be back in the UFC, or you just
Yeah, if the offer was there, I would definitely, obviously, I would jump right to it, and I would love to finish out my career in the UFC. To be a storybook ending for me,
Yeah.
would be able to say, my last 3 fights were in the UFC and I retired. That's what I would like to do. I've heard rumors that they're talking about doing an Ultimate Fighter again, but the comeback series, and bring back guys that used to be in the UFC and they want to bring them back. And if that happened, then that would be something I'd be interested in too. So, but you never know. I don't know if that's it. But whatever whatever opportunity comes up. Right now, I've got some things that are tentative, and then I've got some things that are definitely booked. Right now I'm looking forward to one that is definitely going to happen, and that's in June, and I'll be fighting for, I think it believes the organization calls it Team USA versus the World, and I'll be fighting in that venue, and that's in the Verizon Center in Kansas City. So, I'm looking forward to that, and whatever else comes along my way was, and I'm only fighting when I feel healthy. I'm sure you probably read some stuff. There was a bunch of crap that was out there on the internet in the last couple of days. And MMA Weekly called me and got a statement from me the other day about Paul Daley, and what had happened is that I got a phone call from a promoter out of Ireland, and he said, "Hey, I want you to fight on my card in 4 weeks." And I said, "No, I can't. 4 weeks. I can't fight on a card in 4 weeks' notice." And then after we had our discussion, and he mentioned, it was to fight Paul Daley, and he offered me $8,000 to fight Paul Daley, and I laughed at him. I said, "Listen, even if I had 10 weeks, I don't fight somebody that's a UFC bet for $8,000. I mean, that's a joke." And we had a conversation about it, and that was it. That was it. You never talked about it again. And then, for whatever reason, Paul Daley must have thought that we were going to fight or something was going to happen, and I pulled out of it. Because then I hear Paul Daley saying, I'm afraid of him and getting knocked out by him and all this stuff, and basically that was put all over the internet. And then my reply to that was, if I have a job like an electrician, if you're an electrician and you have a job and you're making $30 an hour, and then somebody else offers you a job and says, "Hey, I'll tell you what, you can do the same work for me and I'll pay you $8 an hour," do you leave your $30 an hour job to go take $8 an hour? Of course you don't. I'm not going to, when I fought here in my home state, I fought in Maine, and after winning the fight, and I got, I got my show and my win money, and then I got 35% of all the ticket sales that I had that generated through both of my gyms, because I own 2 here in Maine. I made another $14,000. So I'm able to walk away from a fight, and I make about $30,000 for fighting somebody who's I don't want to take shots at anybody, but somebody who's more of a class, C or B fighter, not a class A fighter. Why in the heck would you, with less risk and more money, then go to a fight where you're going to make way, a third less money and more risk? And I did tell the promoter, I said, if I could get a guarantee, if I could get in contact, maybe down the road, if we plan this fight, not in 4 weeks, but down the road, and I talked to the UFC and I say, "Hey, if I beat Paul Daley, will you give me a guaranteed win, a guarantee back into the UFC?" I said, "You're damn right I would sign it and I would do it." I said, "But I need some time. I can't do it in 4 weeks." And he said, "Okay, that's great." And I don't know if the promoter was behind it or whoever was behind it, but probably thought, we can play this game and maybe Marcus will, if you call him out and you do this, Marcus will take the fight. And then my explanation back to that when I heard it all is I said, I thought I graduated high school 21 years ago, man. That's not going to work. You can, at this point in my life, when I'm almost 40 years old, and I've fought 15 times in the UFC, and I have not walked away from any fight I've ever been asked to, whether it's been in the ring or not in the ring. I'm not going to get suckered into fighting somebody for chump change.
That's pretty interesting. I didn't even hear anything about that, but now that you bring it up,
that's all over the place. If you go to MMA Weekly, it's right on there saying it's a article and everything. I thought it was ridiculous. And it all started from MMA Junkie. MMA Junkie posted something about it. Then somebody posted it on my Facebook. I read it, and I'm like, that's a joke. And then MMA Weekly calls me, and then MMA Weekly puts it out there. And so,
yeah,
so funny that, here I am on the back burner and no one talking about me or nothing, you know what I mean? And I didn't hear anybody talking about the fact that, I completely dominated David Balcaden, and I let him, that fight, like I said, there's certain fights, I let that kid finish that fight. I could have finished that kid, literally in the first round. I could have finished him. And I wanted to prove a point that I could beat that kid because everybody was telling me he's a jiu-jitsu guy and he's going to beat me on the ground. And I destroyed him on the ground, and every time, any place that the fight took place, I beat him in it. And that was more of a statement fight. And nobody nobody talks about that. And instead, what they do is, rather than the people that do talk about it, which are the fickle fans, rather than saying, oh, hey, that's a great win for Marcus or whatever, instead they say, oh, he beat a bum, he beat a guy that's this and that. And David Balcaden has been riding some pretty, has had a rough go with it too. But all you got to do is actually, if you YouTube David Balcaden's last 4 fights before my fight, the fights that he had lost, you'll see that he was actually in it. And there are 2 fights that are on there that he actually won, and he was robbed of decision. So, like I said, people just say what they,
yeah,
what they say with no filter.
Where I was going with that was, though, I mean, there's no hiding that Paul Daley and Dan Hardy are friends. I mean, they both have trained together. Both British fighters, and everybody knows there was a lot of trash talk between you and Dan Hardy. I wonder if there has something to do with that. Maybe if Paul is trying to instigate something on behalf of Dan. But I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I do think that obviously has something to do with it. You have to be an idiot not to believe that. And also, they all knew that I'm fighting the other teammate in June. That fight that I have in June that I was talking about, I'm fighting another one of their teammates. I'm fighting Jim Wallhead, Jim Wallhead. And so it's funny how, that whole circle right there, how that's, just how it's working out like that. But, like I said, I'm not in high school, and they're supposed to be the cool kids at the cool table, and I'm on the reject table.
Yeah.
Those days are over.
So when you fought Dan, I mean, obviously you were upset. That was a controversial decision. You believe you won. A lot of the fans believe you won, but yet Dan was declared the victor. Is that the one fight that if you could go back, or you could have a rematch, Dan Hardy would be the guy you want to fight, or to
Yeah, I mean, if I could only choose one, that would be the one I would choose. Obviously that would be my first one. But I'm a fighter, so every single fight that I've ever lost, I would love to go back and be able to redo. I mean, that's the life we live. Every time you ever lose a fight, you'll always say, "Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that." So there's never been a fight that I've had that I haven't wished I could redo. And there's even fights that I've won that afterwards I wasn't happy with it, and I wish I could go back and redo. That's the life you lead if you truly chase, being a better MMA fighter or a better whatever it is. You can be a carpenter and you build something and somebody else says, oh, it's wonderful. You can look at it and say, yeah, but I should have done this, and next time I do it, I'm going to do it this way. That's just the way you do it. That's you're not going to get better if you don't demand more from yourself.
Yeah. All right, last, I don't want to hold you up too much longer, so last question, Marcus, is before you started in MMA, before you learned all the aspects of MMA, you were primarily a boxer. So up until last week, the guy that they said had the best hands in MMA was the former UFC heavyweight champion, Junior Dos Santos. I don't know if you watched that fight or not, but
Yes.
it didn't go his way. It didn't look that he came in there fully prepared for the all around MMA aspect that Cain was going to bring to the fight. What did you think about that fight? What do you think that Junior could have done differently? Talk about that fight.
I think that using your hands at MMA, first off, is much different than using your hands at boxing. Not only are they completely different sports, but everything changes. The size of the gloves, the difference there, the way that you can block and keep your hands up and defend yourself in boxing doesn't work the same way in MMA. And the way that you can stand for being able to, the way that you would slip necessarily, or bobbing and weaving in different aspects of the defensive game for boxing, you can't do in MMA because the clinch, because of the knees and the elbows and stuff like that changed that game. But so MMA hands are different than boxing hands, and I think in that fight, I think he just kind of thought that it was going to be the exact same fight as before, and that Cain was going to come out, stand right in front of him, and throw, just so throw his punches there from the outside and try to land the kicks or do whatever. And that's what he, I think, prepared for. And then when Cain came in and his mindset was to come forward, throwing bombs and take him down. I mean, if everybody remembers, in that first round, he spoiled his first, I think it's 4 shots. Like, Cain was shooting, and he did a couple even horrible shots. Cain shot from way and missed. There was one that he missed that was just really bad. And and even Joe Rogan and people, or commentator, the other commentator, made a comment about it, like maybe he's getting a little too desperate to try to get the fight to the ground. But when he finally was able to lay his hands on Junior and hurt him a little bit, that made it easier for him to be able to set up his takedowns, and he became a little more confident. I think in the case of Junior is when he goes back to the drawing board, is that he's not going to want to wait and try to counterpunch Cain, because the counterpunching is not going to work when you've got a guy that comes forward and is mixing it up. Cain wasn't just, it's not like he's counterpunching Cain because Cain's reaching for him and trying to hit him. Cain was actually coming forward and doing takedowns and mixing it up well. So he would need to, be on his bike, not throw punches with flat feet, and move a little bit more while he's punching, rather than just being settled and set, and then doing what he does the best, and that's then defending the takedowns and stuff, and not letting himself get pushed against the cage either, because that will just tire him out and wear and tear on him like it did in that fight. So it's like everybody's mindset now whenever they fight BJ Penn, they say, we'll push him against the cage and we'll lay on him and tire him out that way. It's not just BJ Penn. It's a lot of people. If you haven't wrestled your whole life, that can wear and tear on you if you're just held against the cage and pushed on and pulled on and kneed in the legs and beat up a little bit there. It's going to wear anybody down.
Yeah. All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day, taking time out of your gym there, Team Irish MMA Fitness Academy in Brewer, Maine. Thank you, Marcus.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity to do the interview and get a little bit more exposure out there. Thank you.
Thank you.